Hello everyone, welcome back at my next video on a YouTube channel or any other platform where I'm posting these videos on social media. And we are continuing with our Egypt topic. And this time I prepared for you basically interesting stuff, health and welfare in Egypt, education, then a little bit of cultural life or cultural milieu, the arts of Egypt, so art and how it is actually conveyed here and made, and I mean contemporary current art or modern, and of course cultural institutions and sports and recreation. We can talk really hours about this. I try to be as brief as possible. I prepared something from many sources which I really found. So health and welfare, Egyptian life expectancy at birth was 73.2 years in 2011, or 71.3 years of males and 75.2 years for females. Egypt spends almost 4%, 3.7% of its gross domestic product on health, including treatment, which costs 22% actually incurred by citizens. So citizens and all the people who are actually especially working, they pay 22%, and the rest is paid by the state. In 2010, spending on healthcare accounted for 4.66% of the country's GDP. So it went down, and in 2009 there were 16 physicians and 33.8 nurses per 10,000 inhabitants. I think this ratio is pretty well. There are actually a lot of doctors or nurses here. The medical profession has prestige, and only the better qualified high school graduates are accepted into medical schools. So basically it's a prestigious sort of form very much in this country to be actually doctor, nurse, or somebody medical. Significant efforts were actually made to promote preventive medicine, a compulsory vaccination by state against smallpox, diphtheria, tuberculosis, and poliomyelitis is enforced for all infants during their first 2 years. So it's basically compulsory. The government has attempted to socialize medicine through such measures as nationalizing and controlling pharmaceutical industries and nationalizing hospitals by private organizations and associations, and expanding health insurance during those last 60 years. Well, what is interesting here is that when you are at pharmacy and you are buying any product from pharmacy, except cosmetical products or sort of drogery or cosmetics, then each basically medicine on the box, on the package, including vitamins or like supplements, have a price, and this price is basically fixed price by government. So basically here it's still not like a free market for medicine. I think it's not bad, especially for mass population, because then basically whatever pharmacy you find, wherever you go, you have the same price for this and this and that medicine. It's very good. I basically prefer this. So a health insurance law was passed in 1964 and provides for compulsory health coverage for workers in firms employing more than 100 persons, as well as for all governmental and public employees. So all the military personnel, all the government personnel have compulsory coverage, and also all the businesses, and usually now even tourist business or hotels, all this is compulsory insurance for their employees. Poorer Egyptians often, especially in the past, seek medical care at clinics or hospitals run by Islamic groups. So there are many state-run hospitals and a whole system, medical system, but there are also private hospitals and private clinics, and many of them are run or funded by Islamic groups. Regarding education, at the end of 19th century, so 150 years ago, there were only 3 state-sponsored secondary and 9 higher schools in Egypt. I think it is the reality of many other countries. The educational structure continued to be based on maktabs and kutabs, which are schools devoted to teaching the Quran. for primary education, and then Islamic colleges for higher education. But in 1923, a law was passed providing free compulsory education between the ages of 7 and 12. And although that was not fully enforced until the early 1950s, of course, in 1923, the situation was still actually in many other countries in Europe and everywhere much more different than it's now. There was a sharp increase in funding for education after the World War II, and following the revolution of 1952, progress accelerated. One of the most significant features of this progress has been the spread of women's education. So, of course, more and more women started to be at universities and generally in education, and there has been a sharp increase in the number of women attending universities. There are 3 stages of the general primary education, 6 years, and preparatory 3 years, and secondary 3 years. The primary and preparatory stages are compulsory for children between age 6 and 15. Pupils who are successful in examinations, so who pass actually, have the opportunity to continue their education at the secondary level. So from the age of 15 or 16, there are 2 types of secondary schools: general and technical, and general high schools or secondary schools offer a scientific, a mathematical, and the liberal arts curriculum. Most technical schools are either commercial, agricultural, or industrial, so people can choose. So it's a little bit different than in many other European countries, or many other countries, of course, but I think it's copying more or less the system of France or UK. Alongside the Ministry of Education system of general education, there is that provided by the institutes associated with Al-Azhar University, which is centered on Al-Azhar Mosque, which was founded in 970 in the old quarter of Cairo. Al-Azhar has been an Islamic teaching center for more than 1,000 years. It's one of the primary teaching centers. I think I have mentioned that already. Instruction is given at levels equivalent to those of the state schools, but in order to allow for greater emphasis on traditional Islamic subjects. So basically at these colleges and universities, the primary focus is on normal, compulsory, and instructions by state schools. But then actually the focus is also on Islamic subjects. But of course not everyone is attending these universities or these colleges. The duration of training is lengthened by 1 year at the preparatory stage and 2 at the secondary. So when basically you are studying this kind of system, then you are studying longer because of these Islamic studies. In the 1950s, there were almost 300 foreign schools in Egypt, because Egypt was actually colonized, occupied. The majority of them French. Many of these have since become, in varying degrees, Egyptianized. So they basically Egyptianized a lot of British or French institutions and schools. Pupils who attend these schools at all levels sit for the same state certificate examinations as those in the normal state system. So basically the schools are private, foreign, but the system, how they are actually classified and certified, and these examinations are the same as the normal state systems. The oldest state universities are Cairo from 1908, Alexandria 1942, and Aix-en-Provence 1950, and Asyut 1957. More universities were added to the state system during and since 1970s. There are also several private universities, of course, and the oldest being the American University in Cairo from 1919. So actually, when you want to really study foreign schools from private and foreign schools, and usually private, then Cairo has a lot of primary schools or colleges in universities. The oldest one is American University in Cairo, 1919, and there are many institutes of learning, such as Academy of Arts or Arab music, Western music, or folklore, art criticism. You can study ballet, cinema, theater, childcare. So you can really choose. I think the options are endless in Cairo, especially in Alexandria. Cultural milieu or cultural life. So I'm going to focus on modern contemporary art, not actually ancient Egypt and ancient Egypt art. In spite of the many ancient civilizations with which it has come into contact, Egypt unquestionably belongs to social and cultural tradition that is Arab and Islamic. This tradition remains a constant factor in determining how Egyptians view both themselves and the world. So what we want to say is actually that Egypt is a trendsetter in many Arabic culture or Islamic culture world. And the story of the cultural development of modern Egypt is in essence the response of this traditional system to the intrusion, at first by conquest and later by the penetration of ideas of an iron and technology-oriented society of the West. So the result has been the emergence of cultural identity that has assimilated much that is new and remaining distinctively Egyptian. What is very interesting here that you can see a lot of Western influence and other influences. And I think I mentioned even ancient Egypt actually survived such a long time because they accepted a lot of ideas, cultures, traditions, but they sort of actually Egyptianized that. They sort of distinctively made it Egyptian. So even they accepted a lot of Western ideas, Western cultural formats and paradigms or ideas, but they still made it more Egyptian. So they sort of like clarified or clear it or clean it through Egyptian assimilation. The process at work in all branches of contemporary culture. Egypt is a recognized cultural trendsetter, as I mentioned, of the Arabic-speaking world. Contemporary Arabic and Middle Eastern culture is heavily influenced by Egyptian literature, music, film, television. Egypt actually gained a regional leadership role during the 1950s and 1960s, and giving a further enduring boost to the standing of Egyptian culture in the Arabic-speaking world. Egyptians celebrate, basically, when we are speaking about culture, a number of secular, so sort of Western and religious holidays. The former include Labor Day, Revolution Day in 1952, Armed Forces Day, so very secular. And religious holidays include the two Eids, Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr, because of Islam, and the Prophet's birthday, Mawlid, and then Coptic Christmas, January 7th, because of course here, as I mentioned before, 15 to 20% of the population are Coptic Christians. The arts of Egypt, I think that because it's a big country, Egypt is one of the Arab world's literary centers and has produced many of modern Arabic literature's foremost writers. The impact of the West is one of the recurring themes in the modern Egyptian novel, as in Tawfiq Hakim's Birth of the East, and for instance the novella The Lamp of Hashim. A further theme is that of the Egyptian countryside, depicted romantically at first as Muhammad Hussein Zakal's Zainab, and later realistically as in Abd al-Rahman al-Shahri, The Land and the Peasant. A capacity to catch the color of life among the urban poor is a characteristic quality of early and middle work of Egypt's greatest modern novelist, Naguib Mahfouz, notably in Madik Eli. Mahfouz later won the Nobel Prize for Literature for the Cairo trilogy in 1956 to 1957. Egyptian novelist continues to enjoy critical and popular success in the late 20th, early 21st centuries. I just mentioned several authors which are really very well known and popular, especially in Arabic literature and in Arab world. The modern theater in Egypt is European importation. The first Arabic language plays well performed in 1870. Two dramatists, both born at the turn of the 20th century, dominated its development, Tawfiq al-Hakim and Mahmoud Taimur. The latter, a versatile and cerebral playwright, has reflected in his themes not only the development of modern theater, but also in embryo, the cultural and social history of modern Egypt. Egyptian television has had a powerful influence on regional tastes and viewers throughout the Arab world. Tune into Egyptian programs. The country's most popular actors enjoy wide recognition abroad, especially in Arab-speaking world. What I can say about filmmaking and the movie industry in Egypt is actually that, especially after the World War I, that was founding Misr Studio in 1934, they produced until now around 4,000 movies, which are not very well known in the West, but actually these movies are very popular in Arab-speaking world. Modern Egyptian films are shown to audiences throughout the Arab world and are also distributed in Asian and African countries. The industry is actually owned privately and by the state also. So Ministry of Culture, Egyptian General Cinema Corporation is actually very present in this filmmaking and producing. The best known Egyptian director in the world is Youssef Chahine, whose career as a film director spanned more than 50 years. Then, of course, I think that a lot of people will know actor Omar Sharif, who was well known among Western moviegoers of the 90s and 70s. And he was first as an Egyptian celebrity in 1954 and continued to star in Egyptian films into the 21st century. And then there are many, many others, of course. Music and dance is also very popular. I think belly dance, which a lot of tourists can see it here when they visit actually many hotel resorts and touristic centers. Given the country's ethnic heterogeneity, traditional Egyptian musical styles are quite diverse. Yet the types of instruments found throughout the country are similar to those used elsewhere in the Middle East and North Africa, of course. Well, Egypt is one of the richest architectural traditions in the world, of course, one that spans thousands of years because as one of the oldest civilization, of course, they started with a lot of types of the buildings, types of the styles, Pharaonic, Hellenistic, Roman, Byzantine, Islamic, European tradition. So all these styles, you can find it here in architecture and design. Of course, I'm not going to mention all the sites and all these UNESCO protected World Heritage sites. We go to this later. And contemporary European influences can be seen particularly in Alexandria and Cairo, where sections of each city's corniche are fronted by townhouses, hotels, and mansions, which many quarters and many parts of these cities actually are very, very European and distinctly European design. In all of the major cities, there are sections where such styles are dominant, especially colonial period time, around 1900, Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Ultra-modern structures include the new incarnation of ancient library of Alexandria, which is very modern, Bibliotheca Alexandrina, open in 2002. There has also been a movement beginning in the late 20th century to combine European Islamic architectural style in new constructions. Well, then we have also some cultural institutions. I just mentioned that the oldest secular learned academy in Egypt, the Institut d'Egypte, was founded in 1859, but its antecedents go back to the institute established by Napoleon in 1798. The institute was badly damaged by a fire during the uprising against President Hosni Mubarak in 2011, and thousands of historic books and documents were actually destroyed. It reopened a year later. The Academy of Arabic Language in 1932, which was presided over by the veteran educator Taha Hussein, became, in terms of prestige and influence, one of the most important cultural institutions in Egypt. Then this is actually very important, this Institute d'Egypte and also this academy. And of course, the government has also long been concerned with research, especially in science and technology and in Egyptology. The National Research Center was founded in 1947. Laboratory work in both pure and applied science began there in 1956. The Atomic Energy Organization was established the following year. The Egyptian National Library, which has a large collection of printed materials, is also a center for the collection and preservation of manuscripts. Construction of the new Bibliotheca Alexandrina was a joint venture between UNESCO and the Egyptian government. The Ministry of Culture is responsible for the Egyptian Museum of Islamic Art since 1881, and all are in Cairo, and then Greco-Roman Museum in 1892 in Alexandria. And for other institutions, Mukhtar Museum and Naiji Museum and the Museum of Modern Art, Museum of Fine Arts in Alexandria. So all these institutions, you can find it here. Regarding sports and recreation, the sporting culture of modern Egypt, traces its roots to ancient Egypt, of course. So we know that ancient Egyptians, they had a sport, or at least some sort of sport, where wrestling, weightlifting, and stick fencing and ball games were practiced for both as amusement and physical training. The 1952 revolution resulted in unprecedented government investment in sport. Infrastructure in schools, universities, training institutes, clubs, in an effort to expand the country's international status. Contemporary sports culture reveres prominent wrestlers, weightlifters, who have won most of Egypt's Olympic medals. So weightlifters and wrestlers. Most of the Olympic medals of Egypt are from these disciplines, the boxers and swimmers. Then basketball is very popular because of men's national team and the rising of this, which won the African championships, and volleyball is also very popular and wide following, and various martial arts, including judo and taekwondo, But actually the first and foremost sport, and especially guys watching it, is football or soccer remains the most popular sport in the country. The Cairo clubs, Al Ahly or Zamalek, they usually attract a lot of spectators, like 100,000. So the two clubs, Al Ahly and Zamalek, and between them the two teams have won dozens of domestic championships and continent-wide trophies. The national team, the Pharaohs, our national team, was the first African representative at the World Cup in 1934 and has won the African Cup of Nations a number of times since that competition began in 1957. In 2010, Egypt became the first country to win 3 consecutive African Cup of Nations titles. The Egyptian Olympic Committee was founded in 1910, and an Egyptian first participated in Summer Games in 1912. On several occasions, Egypt boycotted the Olympics for political reasons. First in 1956, protest over the Suez Crisis, again in 1976 against apartheid. In South Africa in 1980 over the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. Egypt has not typically sent athletes to the Winter Games, so Winter Games are not for Egypt. It's one of the hottest countries of this planet, and I would actually end it with this. It's a little bit longer, but I think it's interesting. I was amazed by many information and facts over this. Thank you very much. See you next time.